So QQQM, GPIQ, and VGT together, in my opinion, create the most perfect three-fund portfolio. The reason why I say this is because you get consistent double-digit returns with QQQM, monthly dividends with GPIQ, and long-term high growth with VGT. And what I really like about this specific three-fund portfolio is that it can really be for any type of investor. If you're more of an income-focused investor and would rather get more in dividends every month, you can always have more weighting towards GPIQ. And same thing the other way around. If you want a lot more growth, you could always put 80% in VGT and 10% each in the other two. But no matter which way you structure it, I really do think these are three of the best ETFs to have altogether. Now I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into each of these ETFs, starting with QQQM. So this ETF is of course going to be very similar to the classic QQQ, but the biggest and really the only difference between the two is that QQQM has a slightly lower expense ratio, which saves you a ton in fees after holding for many years. And it's a NASDAQ ETF, so all of its holdings are going to be those consistent and fast-growing large cap companies that tend to grow with double-digit returns year after year, especially during a bull market. Now, QQQM is a fairly new ETF, so we don't have too much historical data, but if we look at its counterpart, just the regular QQQ, you'll notice that it has a 20% 10-year average return. So needless to say, QQQM is a perfect anchor in this three-fund portfolio for that consistent long-term growth. Which takes me to the next ETF in the portfolio. For that consistent monthly cash flow, it's GPIQ, or the Goldman Sachs NASDAQ Premium Income ETF. This is a NASDAQ covered call ETF that's currently paying just under a 10% annual dividend yield. And it's also a fairly new ETF as well. It's only been around for a little over 2 years now, but ever since its inception, it's been paying a consistent monthly dividend of around 40 cents per share. And the amount paid per share is continuing to increase year over year. Its last payout amount, for example, was 47 cents per share. So this means that even if you only had about $10,000 in GPIQ, you'll be getting paid just under $100 a month in dividends. So you can then take that cash that you're getting every month and reinvest it back into GPIQ or the other two funds in the portfolio. And what I really like about this ETF is, although it's already paying a nearly 10% dividend yield, it still tends to grow year over year. For example, it's up nearly 7% year to date, not including that yearly 10% yield. So it's perfect for consistent monthly income plus a little bit of capital appreciation. This leads me to the third and final piece of this three-fund portfolio, which is VGT, or the Vanguard Information Technology ETF. Now this ETF is of course going to be very similar to QQQM, with just a little bit more concentration on the tech sector. So it's also going to be holding a lot of those large to mega cap technology companies that notoriously grow like crazy over the long term. And when it comes to growth, its 10-year average ever so slightly beats out that of the QQQ at an average 23.4% annual growth rate. And one of the best things about this ETF is, because it's a Vanguard fund, its expense ratio is super low at 0.09%, saving you potentially thousands of dollars in fees over the long term. So these three ETFs together, in my opinion, create an absolute powerhouse of a portfolio. And if we plug these three ETFs into our backtesting tool here, we can see how they perform against the S&P 500. And as I said before, you can allocate the weighting to each of these funds however you want. But in this case, I did 30% into QQQM, another 30% into GPIQ, and the remaining 40% into VGT. So once we plug it in, you'll notice that it only dates back to January 2024 because of the limited data that we have on some of these ETFs, but it's still about a 2-year time frame. And since then, it's averaged an annualized return of 28%, beating out the S&P 500 by just under 5% per year. Now, again, that's only about a 2-year return, but I'm pretty confident that this three-fund portfolio will continue to have similar results going forward and continue to outperform the S&P 500. So I think it's obvious by now that I'm a big fan of these three ETFs, but let me know what you guys think of them, and I will see you all next time.